All right, looks like I'm live. So, hey, everybody. Looks like we got a couple people here already. We just wait till a few more start. Hopefully, a few more show up before we get into the meat and potatoes of today. But I'm here, so if anybody has any questions they want to rifle in, just type them in over there, and I'll answer as needed. I got a few things I want to kind of talk about today, and I hinted that some of the topics I want to touch on today. So. Um, we'll get into those. I was going to wait for a few more people to show up before I start getting into stuff. Busy week. I got working on 4 boards this week. Plus, I got some other things, projects and things I'm working on outside of bodyboarding. I do some other things. I have my own architecture business and woodworking business I've had for years. So I get sucked into all kinds of projects and things outside of bodyboarding. But it's just part of my pie. Bodyboarding is one little slice of my pie. Making boards and running bodyboards is part of my income pie. It's one of the biggest incomes for me these days. I mean, I don't do a whole lot of architecture and design anymore just because I'm having so much fun doing bodyboard stuff. But gosh, I love doing woodworking projects, just like really super custom stuff. So I got sucked into a couple things this week for some friends and a couple contractors I know. But it's good to keep my hands busy with other tools and do other things outside of building boogie boards, just to keep the skills sharp with all the other tools and things you need to do. So like I said, if anybody has any questions, just fire them off, and I'll get to going on any kind of questions. Like I said, I got 4 boards. I'm over halfway done with the 4 boards I got going on. They're 3 of them are going to Southern California, and one's going to Puerto Rico. So I'm always stoked to send one outside of California somewhere. I send a lot of stuff to Hawaii, but Puerto Rico's. I have a few boards in Puerto Rico now, but the more that get down there, and the more people kind of see them, get their hands on them, I think that I get more and more inquiries from other places once people see the boards. So I think that's once you put your hands on it and kind of touch these boards versus a stock factory board, there is a difference. From what I'm told, like I said, I usually just ride my boards. I haven't ridden a lot of stock or other brand boards, just because why would I can make anything I want for myself. So I'm very, very fortunate to experiment with designs and things and evolve my own board and all the features. And I've been doing that and tweaking my design for my personal board for probably about 15 years. I've really been kind of tweaking stuff. So one of the big things that for me early on was I was really, once I got into doing full concave bottoms on a lot of my older customs, I was like, okay, man, the bottom of the board I'm really into, but the top of the board, how can we make the top of the board better? Instead of just having a flat deck board, what are the possibilities? And back then they were a little limited as far as the deck contours and things. Deck contours are definitely something I wanted to talk about tonight, so maybe I'll just get into some of that stuff. Early on, I got a couple boards that early on that had like hip grooves, just simple hip grooves back towards the tail, nothing up towards the front of the board, just to kind of help lock my hips into the board so I'm not slipping and sliding around on the tail. And then over time that evolved into going, oh geez, there were some early tubes board models that when I kind of started writing a lot of tubes custom boards that had like a horseshoe type cut up and around the nose. So like, I forget the actual model it was, but it had like a horseshoe cut, kind of similar to the ones that you see a lot of on my boards, just the upper part of the contour. So, what I wanted to do is, so I was like, geez, well, I can put an upper thing to kind of help lock my elbows and hip and forearms and thumb wrap over anywhere you kind of grabbing up towards the front of the board, just to get a more positive grip and kind of lock your elbows into the rails of the board so your elbows don't slip off the edge of the rail. That was one thing I noticed early on, because I also don't wax my personal boards. I just ride without wax. So I know a lot of people prefer having wax on their boards to kind of just stick them onto the top of the board, and that's cool. There's no right or wrong, whatever works best for you. But so the initial contours I was doing was like this horseshoe cut up towards the top of the board on some of my early tubes boards. But then I was like, okay, well, that's cool and all, but what about the areas a little bit further back? Because like when you go and dropping your hand further back on the rail when you're going to take off on stuff, and being able to wrap your thumb over that rail. You know, you see a lot of boards that just have the little like the thumb lines in it, and then you see like the palm contours up top. You see like the palm contours, and then you see a little line down the side. I've done quite a few just similar to that, but you know, I didn't ever have line contours on my boards. I was always a little bit bigger and fatter, deeper, not deeper, but just fatter contours. Instead of like a 1 inch line, it's actually more like a 3 to 4 inch kind of groove all the way up and around the nose. I just found like it adds to the positive grip, because you can get your thumb over the rail, and your thumbs don't slip off the rail, and your elbows don't slip off the rail. So critical situations, it just gives you more control. And then over time, I was like, well, geez, you know, and then I had one that had the horseshoe cuts, and then I started doing hip grooves with that horseshoe cut, and then I was like, well, geez, what about that in between spot, in between where the horseshoe stopped and then where the hip groove started? It's like, well, why the heck doesn't it just continue through there? That was kind of my thinking, is that it should just be one continuous contour all the way through the board, and that's kind of how it all evolved. I came back to my wood shop one day, and I sat down with a couple of my older boards, and I have them up in one of my older tubes boards. I just took a Sharpie and drew on the board. I was looking like where my elbow creases were at on the board. And I go, okay, well, that's where I know I want my little elbow cut in that you see. Got a couple of boards right back here actually that I'm working on. You can kind of see some of the contours on this board. That's kind of whiting out a little bit there. But this, you can see like this little indentation. I just figured out where my elbow creases were out on the boards, and that's kind of where I took and did this little indentation for where your elbow lands. And then, like I said, these contours just continued down and through the tail, and then it evolved into, all my older boards are V-tails, but once I got into all the scallop tail boards, you can see how this contour line ends up with the point of the scallop tail, right? And then that point also takes and wraps around to the bottom of the rib the rib and the channel contour up underneath. So it's kind of a really cool cohesive design from the top all the way through the bottom. The lines line up. It all makes kind of sense. It's all cohesive design. So things work together instead of just out like my old ones were just V-tails, and I had the same contour running through a V-tail. But I'll tell you what, it was just, once I got into the scallop things, this little scallop portion and how this locks in, you just lock your hip and thigh lock into this portion way better. And what's really cool about it now is that because this goes back just a little bit, this goes all the way up and around, anywhere where you grab now, you have a thumb wrap over. Like, I mean, I know some guys just want like the palm contours up here, the line contour here, but what my thinking is that what happens if your hand, I mean, sometimes you have your hand here in certain situations, or man, I know there's times where my hand drops way back here, way back, just depending on if I'm hitting the lip and I need to have, I just know that I wanted to make sure I had that thumb wrap anywhere where I would wrap my hand over, just to have that positive grip. And like I was saying before, is that this is right where your elbow lands. And I realize my arm might be a little bit longer than other people, but it's really kind of the universal contour that's worked out for me that, so it works really versatile. I mean, like I know a lot of guys that I've made them that, they're smaller guys or bigger guys, but these contours really are versatile for a lot of different size riders. And sometimes I will shift this, like the bigger the board gets, the further I'll shift this back, and then I'll push the elbow contours back just a little bit too. So, you can see this one has deck bulbs on it too. And it's all laid out to put the bumps on it. That's what all these lines are, is for the little traction bumps that I put on some of my boards. Traction, and as far as deck contours go, there's two things you can do. Once you have a flat board, in order to get a contour, you either have to router something out. That's how I get all these cutouts. And I use a router with a dish bit on my router. I router all this out. So there's two types of contours. There's stuff that goes into the board, and then there's stuff that raises up above the board to get, it's either above the deck or below the deck to add a contour. So, like, nose bulbs, they're above the deck surface, right? You can definitely see that those things stick up above the deck, where all these contours are sunk down into the board. So it's just, this type of a setup with nose bulbs and bumps, and then my standard contours have the best of both worlds. You got stuff that goes above the deck surface, and you have stuff that cuts into the deck surface. So, like I said, I'm just such a fan of this contour, and I know the more and more people that I turn on to it, it really is a very good contour. I mean, there's also things that happen is, you're also taking volume out of the board too. So that's another factor with deck contours when you cut into a board, is you're taking volume out of the board. So that's a factor. I mean, some people are like, oh, geez, I don't want contours because it's going to take volume out of my board. Well, channels do the same thing. These little big long channels that cut through boards also take volume out of the board. So what do you do to compensate for that? You just you start with a thicker core. If you're worried about losing buoyancy of your board and you're, oh, geez, we're taking too much volume out of the board with all the contours and channels, then you just have to start with a little thicker boards, and that kind of solves the problem with buoyancy. So yeah, I mean, the evolution of that contour, like I said, I came back to my shop and just sat around and drew on one of my boards, and then I sat down with a piece of MDF. I have it right over here. Just grab it real quick. I sure wish I would have put a date on this thing, but because this is the deck contour template that I use for all the deck contours that you see that have that kind of elbow cut through the scallop tail. I wish I would have dated this when I made it. I know it was long. It was made years before I even started running, and I just took this into the tubes factory and said, guys, I want this contour. Can you put it on my board? And they looked at me like, well, maybe you should come in and do it. So that's really how my whole shaping journey started. I was getting custom boards from tubes, and I was wanting to push the realm of what they wanted to mess with just because they were so busy. So that's how I got into shaping, is they were like, why don't you just come in and cut the contours? And it started with that, and then it just evolved into me being the head shaper at tubes for a couple years. So that's kind of a little brief overview of deck contours and kind of like where mine comes from. Like I said, looks like we got a few more people in here now. So like I said, if anybody has any questions, fire them off down over here in the chat window off to this side, and I'll be happy to answer anything that people want to throw in there. I'm kind of just an open book for sharing knowledge of whatever I got in my head about boogie boarding. So big fan of deck contours. I just like the channels. I think there is, for a modern board, all modern boards should have both. You're really missing out I think it's kind of weird sometimes where guys will entertain modern channels, but then they don't want to entertain or incorporate a modern tail design or deck contours in the board. Well, I'm open to trying one thing, but all this other stuff's maybe sometimes a little bit too much for guys. But I'm telling you, once you try it, you probably, once you get right, every time I ride a flat deck board now, it just doesn't feel right to me. Just because, for starters, my thumb doesn't wrap over that edge anywhere around the board, anywhere where I grab, and my elbows tend to slip off the edge of the board a little bit. It just really, those contours just really lock you into the deck of the board. Now, as far as the traction bumps go, I know some people are kind of curious about the whole process of those things and what they actually do. And is it a gimmick? I've heard all kinds of things like, oh, that's just a gimmick. Those things don't do anything. And I don't know. I mean, do they do something? Yeah, definitely. Do they make or break you sliding off the deck of your board? They're not going to lock you onto the deck of your board, but friction adds. Yeah, exactly, Sterling. That's another thing, is like the guys that wax their boards. When you wax the top of your board, it really builds up on those little bumps of the traction bumps. So if you wax your board, it definitely helps build up the wax in those spots, and it really locks you into. It helps you from sliding around the deck of your board. I know, like some of the first trips I made over to Hawaii, I was just wearing a rash guard, and like I said, I don't wax my board, so I was slipping and sliding all over my board. And I came back, I'm like, man, I gotta try to figure out a way to kind of minimize the slipping and sliding around the deck of my board because I don't use wax. And at home, I pretty much wear O'Neill wetsuits pretty much at home all the time, and I really like the O'Neill wetsuits that have like that sticky rubber piece in the chest. Like if you have that on your wetsuit versus like a smoother kind of skin, like what the arm pieces are, if you have that smoother slick or smoother neoprene that's all the way through the chest of your board instead of like that rubbery piece that like the O'Neills have, and I know Excel has them, and a few other brands have that sticky rubber in the chest. That really makes a big difference for not needing wax. It really helps you from slipping especially like when you're paddling. If you don't have that sticky rubber piece in the chest, you slip and slide around on the deck of your board a lot. So I know that's the main reason why I got a lot of the guys in Hawaii that don't wear a wetsuit and they just wear rash guards. Everybody waxes up because they slip and slide around their boards. So, yeah. So as far as the traction bumps go, do they work or they do something? Sure. Yeah. What it does is it adds a little bump, and any kind of little bump's going to add friction, and that will stop you. I mean, it's not going to save you, but it adds something. You know, something's better than nothing. That's what even if it stops you 5% of the time of sliding off your board. It's not going to stop you 100% of the time sliding off the board, but if you could stop 5% of the time, that's 5% of the times you're not slipping off your board and blowing away and kooking it up. So, you know, like I said, every little thing adds up. You know, if you just incorporate one thing, you're only getting part of it. But once you start incorporating all these concepts into a board, all those little things all add up into something instead of it just being just one thing. So I really think there is something to all the features that you can kind of stack into a board these days, and it really adds to the performance of a board. So looks like we're almost up to 10 people. That's cool. So like I said, if anybody's got any comments or questions, right down there is the thing. Light it up, man. Let's get into some chat and talking about some stuff if anybody has any questions. Yeah, I mean, I have a couple other things, but we got a ways to go still. Oh, Nick asked about checkered rails and how they're made. Actually, if you look on here on the YouTube channel, there's actually a little time lapse of me doing it. So if you want to, and the checkered rail is it's the pinstripe. It's the inner rail of a board. What you do is you take a long piece of rail and you chop it up into little squares and you weld all those pieces end to end. And then you put the inner rail on, then you put the outer rail on over that. If you go and look at, there's a little time-lapse video here on YouTube of me doing it. So it kind of shows you a little bit of how they go together. Not really how I put them on. I don't think the video shows me putting it on a board, but it shows the basic process of me stacking up all those little pieces and putting them all together end to end. I think it's cool. I've had quite a few of my older boards, tube boards, have checkered rails. So I don't get a lot of requests to do them on boards these days, but I'm always willing to do any of them. That's what custom's all about, is making it cool and personal and to you. And so nobody else has got that board when they're walking down the beach. That's what it's all about. That's your board and no one else has one like it. So checkered rails definitely add a cool look to a board for sure. Yeah, so I mean that's kind of the process. Is you just take a normal rail piece and you chop it up into little pieces and little pieces end to end. I think that probably gets your question, Nick. Oh, Nick, you want to see your board? It's right back here. Got the R on the bottom already. Yeah, I'll be laminating the deck on it tomorrow. Got all the bumpers and stuff put on it today, and I was busy doing contours. I was busy doing contours on all the other boards today. Bumpers and contours, kind of what I was working on today. Yeah. Yeah. There's a few of them going down to Southern California out of this batch. Like I said, I got 3 of them in there that are all going down to Southern California. The 4th one's going to Puerto Rico, which is pretty cool. Yeah, guys, I guess there's some south swell has been hitting down there in Southern California. I've seen some pictures. It looks like it's really fun. I sure wish those south swells would make it up here. I think Point Conception blocks a lot of the south swells, especially the kind of steeper they are where I'm at up here. Point Conception blocks a lot of that and just blows right by Morro Bay and Pismo and those areas. But it needs a little bit more west in it here to kind of get the south swells in. But man, there are some south swell spots up here that only break on a decent south swell. They're like reef breaks that are pretty much world class. I mean, they're as good as a wave gets, really. There's some really, really cool south swell spots up here. Like north of Cayucas, there's some pretty cool spots. And we got reef breaks and sand, mostly, like out at my beach right out here out in front. It's just a sand bottom, 5 mile long sand bottom beach break. So it's a lot of fun, but well, Sterling around here, I imagine you're asking like around here. Well, there's Montana de Oro, like on the south end of our bay, there's a state park. And so Montana de Oro has some really fun waves out there. There's a couple spots that are kind of known, but they're pretty localized. I mean, I'll paddle out anywhere out there. I don't care anymore. Nobody's going to tell me I can't surf a wave in my bay or Morro Bay. It's not my bay. It's everybody's bay. But yeah, there's some spots over there. And the sand spit, what they call the sand spit out there, it's just a big old long, like 4 to 5 mile long sand beach you break, but it gets deep water really quick and it gets heavy, man. It's the only thing around here that I can even kind of compare to Hawaii is Montana de Oro and the sand spit that's out there. But if you know where to go out there, there's a couple little reef breaks and stuff that there's just a world-class reef break out there that's very localized. But like I said, those reefs up in the northern part of the bay on the South Swells are amazing. I'm a lazy surfer. I usually just walk down the street and surf out at the beach break out here. Now, you know, the really popular place is Morro Rock and a lot of people are kind of familiar with Morro Rock because like it's such a landmark here in the bay. It's a 562-foot big old dome of a rock that just sits out in the bay, and then there's a harbor mouth that kind of comes in around that, and it goes into an estuary in what we call the back bay back there. It's beautiful kayaking and stuff back there. And what you can do is on the north side of the rock, there's a huge parking lot, and you can just jump in the water right there, and you can surf right next to that rock, the Morro Rock out there. And it is, I mean, some of the best ways in my life I've gotten out there right next to the rock. The left that comes off that during bigger swells is really good. I mean, 100-yard ride, no problem. I have a timestamp GoPro of me out there. It was a 42-second ride, I think it was. It was a pretty legit long ride. Also, you know, what you can do is also, if you go on the south side of the rock, you can jump in the water and then swim across the harbor mouth, and then there's a couple jetties that are out on the other side or the south side of the rock. And if you get on the far side of that jetty, there's what we call the south jetty. There's a wave that kind of peels and breaks down the one side of the jetty on the south side of the rock. That can be really fun too. That one breaks on all kinds of swells too. And then when it gets really, really big out where it's almost like Black Flag, where you can't really go anywhere, there's some waves that are inside the harbor there that are really fun too. There's this one little wedgy wave that comes off this center little poke of a jetty that's just really fun, short little wedgy wave. There's also one that kind of wraps in around the north jetty. Like I said, the south jetty is the one on the south side, but then there's another north jetty that comes in, and then there's a big opening where the boats come in and out through the harbor. And what on the really big days we call it widow walls, because there's off the north jetty, the waves will just come in and they'll just smash in up and over the jetty. And I mean, just huge whitewater explosions. But what it does is it'll come in and wrap in around the end of the jetty, and it just peels all the way through the inside. It's probably, I don't know, chest shoulder high, and it's just a perfect little all the way through. It's super fun. So like I said, those are a couple of spots. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty lazy. I usually just walk at what we call A Beach, where it's Morro Strand State Beach is what it is right out here. There's a campground too. You can camp right on the beach out here, right out in front of my house, and there's almost always surf, because my beach out here picks up every angle of swell. It can be, there's almost always a wave to ride. It's crazy. It's so consistent. So those are a few of the spots. At Cayucas Pier, they're up in, if you go north, some of the bigger swells, once it starts getting really big in the winter swells, Cayucas Pier can be really fun. But it does take a few of the bigger swells to come in and start pulling some of the sand out. And it kind of needs some of the creeks to break through up there too. And Cayucas Pier can be really fun too. Got some really fun waves up at Cayucas Pier. So those are some of the few spots here in Morro Bay and kind of the areas I surf. You can go up north up towards Big Sur. There's tons of spots at Cambria, and obviously Pismo Beach is another one that people are probably familiar with. It's just the next, like on the other side of Montana de Oro and around the corner, the big point that's out to the south end of our bay. The next little section is all of Pismo Beach. You get Shell Beach and Pismo Beach, and there's just a ton of waves over there too. But I don't ever feel the need to drive around there, just because there's almost always a wave somewhere here in our bay to catch. There's just not a reason to really drive anywhere. Keep the questions coming, guys. I'm definitely watching the chat, so if you guys want to throw in a comment or a chat or a question, go for it. Looks like we're 24 minutes into it, so. Said I want to do these pretty consistently. I want to do them for an hour long on Friday nights, like what I've been doing, and I'm going to do them as often as possible. So if you don't have a question now and you think about something in the week, you can always comment on the video on the feed, and I'll watch the comments and try to get back to you on the comments there. Or if you just want to wait till the next week and wait for the question then that's cool too. So whatever. I just want to help and spread some knowledge about boogie boarding and how things are made and processes and stuff. So keep the questions coming. I mean, doesn't seem like there's a whole lot in there. We got 10 people in here. There should got to be somebody in here that's got a question, right? Don't be shy either, man. Yeah, Adam, there might be. I mean, I could do live feeds on Instagram, but the thing about that is that, you know, I don't know. I mean, yeah, and then they would probably post onto my account too, but I don't know. I just think YouTube's kind of a better platform, and I really want to start building my content here on the YouTube channel. I have some shot videos and stuff, but I don't have a lot of informational stuff like what I'm doing now. So this is going to be a platform I kind of do this stuff on, but I might entertain a live feed of maybe me working in the shop on YouTube or on Instagram sometime. But these chats, I think that, you know, when I'm doing it on YouTube and if I'm working on something, I can't really watch the comment section like I can right now. And I'm just sitting here and trying to be as responsive as I can to people's questions. That's, hey, Matthew's asking if I ever have people come by to the shop and to figure out design of their board, or is it all on Instagram? Well, I think I definitely have. I've had quite a few customers stop by the shop here, and we just sit down and figure out what they want. So that's always an option. You know, if you're in the area or you're passing through and you want to just check things out, or you want to meet me, or you want to kind of see what it is and how I do all this stuff. I mean, I'm pretty open usually to sharing what I do here to people. Almost always welcome. You just got to shoot me a message through Instagram or Facebook. But as far as working out details, really the chat on Instagram is where I do a lot of that stuff. I find it really easy just to bounce messages back and forth on Instagram and work out details with people. It really is a pretty cool platform for doing that. But hey, in person's always almost even better too, because, you know, you can put your hands on material and you can see core and you can see all the things that, you know, you're not going to see just by chatting on YouTube or Instagram. It's coming to the shop and actually seeing the materials and seeing the process. It's going to be a more fulfilling experience. Something else I've also thought about maybe doing in the future, and I was kind of kicking this around before COVID hit, is, you know, hey, if you want to be part of the process of building your board, I might be open to doing that. If like, I have had customers come by and hang out almost all day while I work on and build their board. And, you know, if you want to be part of the process, or maybe, you know, hold a rail down while I'm helping push, you know, putting the rail on or something, I'm kind of going to maybe open that up and give that a shot to have, you know, people come by and be part of the process of building their boards. I know a lot of people are curious about the building process and how it all goes together. And I don't think it'd be a bad idea just to be hanging out in the shop and watching the whole process go down. Yeah, Matt, if you're around in the area, you know, like I said, I'm on Whidbey Way, which is just like 2 streets south of Yerba Buena. And, you know, I'm right up the hill from A Beach or Morro Strand. So yeah, if you're ever in the area, just hit me up through Instagram or email me or whatever and let me know when you want to stop by. I'm around all the time. I don't really go anywhere too much. So I'm a homebody. I work and surf, or I work and bodyboard pretty much. That's pretty much my life. You know, another thing I wanted to talk about a little bit today was, you know, in the past I've done some. Adam asked if I'd ever be interested in doing a collaboration with Buzz from Tubes. Oddly enough, I was just at the grocery store right before I started this. I made a run down to the grocery store here in Morro Bay, and I ran into Buzz. So yeah, I see Buzz around town every once in a while, and, you know, he's pretty busy doing what they do down at the factory. So that, you know, I don't want to, you know, step on any toes. I'm kind of in doing what I do, and they do what they do, and that's good enough for all of us right now. I'm super grateful for my time at Tubes. It gave me all my knowledge about how to build a board. So you know, they're doing their own thing, and I'm doing my thing, and that's fine. I think that's probably where it's going to stay for a while. I got a ton of respect for Buzz, but I don't think he's got the time or energy to really be working on boogie boards anymore. So he's pretty busy doing rescue sleds these days. That's kind of what they do at the factory there. Yeah, Phil, you can come by and sweep some dust up. In fact, I probably need to do that right now. Yeah, if you loiter too long, I put you to work. That's kind of the deal. It's like, you know, if you're standing around and not doing nothing, yeah, there's always something to clean around here for sure. I'd be amazed by how much dust and foam particles that this process kind of does. I have a nice dust collector that kind of is a super big help. You know, air compressor and a dust collector are super helpful with the process, just blowing stuff off and collecting it almost as quickly as possible so stuff doesn't get airborne. All my band saws and stuff hook up to dust collectors, so when I'm cutting, nothing really gets airborne. All the microplastics that are generated from the process of cutting and doing stuff, that's a factor. All that stuff, I want to try to minimize it as much as possible. Those microplastics are just evil for the environment. They all wash down the hill and right out in the ocean, and they never break down because they're plastic. So that's a factor for me. I try to catch as much as I can. I don't blow anything out the door and into my driveway at all. I try to vacuum up everything I possibly can. It'd be nice to try to find some materials someday that aren't so plastic oriented, and try to find some plant-based foams or something. Might become a really cool future of materials that could be really fun to play around with. They're just not really that available yet. I know there's a few foam manufacturers that have been playing around with some different types of foam and stuff, and I would love to get some samples and play around with stuff. Okay, JK is asking about rail design. He's talking about rounded rails, like similar to the BSDs, and then diamond rails, which are kind of similar to the rounded rails, but they're a little bit more pointed. Curious about the rails that are scooped out. So the scooped out rails, I call them channeled rails. So I put channeled rails on all of my personal boards. I'm a true believer into the channeled type of rails. I actually do have a rounded rail board too. So I don't have a diamond rail board because I just think that all a diamond rail board is a really sharp pointed rail. And it still has a cut top chine piece and a lower rail piece. So it's not one continuous piece all over the rounded rail like what the BSDs do. It's more like two pieces that come together. But you got a top chine piece and a lower rail that kind of come to a really sharp point. That's how I have seen the diamond rail boards. But channel rails are, channel rails are, man, they really help walk into the face of the wave. It really we've talked a little bit about side slipping and stuff before with all what the bottom channels do. But what I tend to do is the front half of my channel rails are still standard rails. But then once you get past about where your elbow's at on the board, from about there back towards the tail, what I do is I start taking that face of the rail and start channeling it out just a little bit. So you get a little scoop in the back half of the rail, and it starts mellow and then it just gets more extreme towards the tail at the point. And what that really does is it gives you like a really sharp kind of point of you still have your chine, but you really get a nice sharp point in the back half of the board. And it really helps minimize, and it just bites into the face of the wave when you have the board on a rail and you're sitting back a little bit on the tail. It just bites and holds, and it helps track your direction, and it just bites and holds so much better than just a regular rail. Huge fan of channeled rails. So I got to do a couple of them on the boards that are right behind me here too. So I know I'm doing more and more of those these days, because I think once people start getting aboard with them and they ride it, it opens their mind like, oh wow, this is a pretty cool feature to boards, and it adds definitely some performance to the board. My rounded rail board, I've ridden it a bunch. I forget the number off the top of my head. It's an orange and black board. But I love that board, man. It is so flowy. There's something about having a rounded rail board, and they're a pain in the ass to do though. Like as far as the build on them, they're not easy to do. But man, I'll tell you what, there's something about how they're just more flowy. I mean, it might have a little bit, obviously it's going to have more side slip and a little bit, it's not going to bite into the faces, but there's something about when you put a rounded rail on a board on rail into the face of a wave and how it flows down the line. There's something to it. It definitely is a cool feature for sure. Like I said, I'm not a super big fan of doing them just because they're a pain in the ass to build, but I get sucked into them every once in a while. There's a guy in the UK. I've done a few boards. He absolutely loves those. I'll probably be doing one real soon. Adam's asking about some recycled foam. I know I haven't really brought up Gatto's name in these chats, but I know he's got some recycled PP foam, and I'm not sure where he gets it. It might be a European thing versus America. But man, if I could find some recycled PP core, I would definitely have it in the core selections of what I have. But like I said, I just got set up with a new foam manufacturer. The regular PP cores are killer from this new distributor. So for now, that's what I'm going to be using until I can. But I'm always on the hunt for maybe some alternative materials, especially when it comes to core. Now, if I could find some recycled PP core in the United States, I would definitely be buying some, giving it a go. It's just not available. I've asked from the foam suppliers that I buy from, and they just don't have it. I wish it was available. Nick's asking about raised rails on the DK boards. Yeah, super popular on DK boards. I mean, it's great for prone too. What it does, it gets back to like the contours, like I was talking about before, is that if you're not DKing, and come on, when you're riding, you only ride for get 10 seconds of riding. That's a great wave, But when you're not riding and you say you're duck diving, you're paddling, you're doing whatever, what it does is it gives you that thumb wrap over the edge of the board. And it also will lock, sometimes you just want to prone ride, even if it's a DK board, you just want to prone ride a board. It's going to lock your elbows, and your elbows aren't going to slide off the edge of the rail. And you get that thumb over the rail anywhere where you're grabbing. So now, as far as DK goes, once you get up, what it does is it kind of stops you. It helps stop your foot from sliding off the rail or your knee sliding off the other rail, depending on what stance you are. But that's the thinking behind the raised rails, is that it's kind of like like what I showed you before with the nose bulbs. It's a piece that's added on, so it's actually above the board. It's not getting routed down in like what a thumb groove would be. It's actually getting raised up off the edge of the board. So then quite a few DK boards, and sometimes I can do it just with so it's stance specific. So you're just getting raised. Say if you're like regular footed and you put your left foot forward, you just have a raised rail up on the front part of the left side rail and nothing in the back half. And then on your right rail, you go about from where your knee's at back. So it's like stance specific. But I always thought, why wouldn't you just have it all the way through both sides? I think there's, like I said, there's still a benefit from when you're duck diving or whatever, and you got that positive grip of your thumb over the rail. It really does add something to holding on to your board in crazy situations. So yeah, I'm a fan of raised rails, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I love my contours that I do on most of my boards, but if I couldn't do those kind of contours, I would definitely be putting raised rails on my prone boards. But I really like the contours I have going on my boards. Adam's asking if I've ever done any replica boards for people. Well, yeah, definitely. I've done some, like the Barba board. That a lot of people like to say that I took my scallop tail design from the old school Barba, like tri-crescent one. So I've done a couple of the Barba styled tri-crescent boards for people. And I have, let's see, I mean, I've definitely done replicas for people and especially if oh gosh, I love this board. I have the dimensions, I know what I want. I just want to kind of get that board remade. Can you do it? Yeah, definitely. I'm all about that. But just, a lot of times I think people get hung up with the idea that, oh geez, this board was the best board ever. And it's clip crescent standard channels. And I'm just like, man, it probably was good then, but there's things that we're doing now with board designs that, as far as performance goes, you might take the template and dimensions because you really like the size of the board and the thickness and everything else, but you might incorporate some of the newer concepts and stuff into that template, and you might discover, wow, I really love the. But hey, I'm open to whatever. I ultimately just want to build the board my customer wants. So I always try to push some other designs and things to try to improve the performance of boards, but ultimately it's about what the customer wants. That's what I want to build. I don't get my feelings hurt when people don't want something. That's cool. I'll build whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, but sometimes it hurts knowing that people aren't opening their minds to the possibilities of what we can do these days with board design. So, but just want to build what people want. Sterling, I know Sterling's got the board Sterling's riding right now is basically just it's just a scaled down version of my board that I ride, my template I've been riding for years, and I'm sure he can attest to how that board goes. So, and Nick is his photographer and buddy, and Nick just ordered a board, but he was getting a little nostalgic about an older board, so we built him something simple this time, but we're going to probably do something special for Nick the next time around. So yeah, I keep the questions and comments going, guys. It really does help me, so I don't feel like I'm just sitting here spinning my wheels talking to myself. Something else I maybe wanted to touch on a little bit today before we run out of time is stamps. A lot of people are curious about how do you stamp a boogie board? You can kind of see some of the stamps that are up here is kind of a little thing that I've been every once in a while I'll do something and just hot glue it up there onto the board. It's kind of a fun little collage of some of the logos and stuff. But heat stamps are carved out of aluminum on a CNC machine. So if you're not familiar with a CNC machine is, basically it's like a computerized router. So you have a router motor that has like a carbide type of bit in it, and I mean, lots of times, you know, you use it to carve, basically just carve anything. Once you have the artwork for what you want, you can basically do some pretty intricate carvings and stuff. I mean, everything, so much stuff's made with a CNC machine. I think it's called computer navigated control. So it's all controlled by a computer. So you don't have to do anything. Once you have your design, you have all the software and stuff, it generates out what they call a G code. So that G code inputs into another software that runs the CNC machine. And basically once you have the G code generated, you just input it into the software, and you press start, sit back and watch it carve. It's a pretty cool thing to watch. It really is fun just to watch it do all of its things. So, I mean, I got a whole box full of my stamps and some stamps I've done for other people here. The very first stamps, you know, people, which are the triangle logo here, and then the Ronin one that's like right up there. So what you can see here is, I mean, you can kind of almost see the router marks, like how it carved out and how it goes around and carves all that stuff out. So basically what it is like a branding iron kind of. So what you do is you take this and I have like wooden handles and stuff too. That's what you see, like the little holes that are in here. I got a little threaded handle. So these things, I can switch these handles from stamp to stamp. So this just screws into the back of here, and then you stick this on a hot plate and you heat this thing up so it gets really warm. And then what you do is you have like these colored film papers that go in between the stamp and the board, depending on what color you want your stamp. And you just stick it down there, hold it for a few seconds, and then pull it off. You wait for it to cool off, and then you peel the film off, and then you have whatever you kind of like what you see, all the logos that are back up here. So, you know, as far, and you know, there's one of the big R stamp. This one's pretty popular, the helmet stamp. I call the helmet stamp. But like I said, this one and then the triangle logo one here, these were carved by Buzz down at the Tubes factory right before I started Ronin. So I came up with the artwork of these two. I've posted some pictures of the original artwork for these two. It's basically just me. I just sat down with a piece of paper and with the Sharpie and drew these things out. So I have the original artwork upstairs. It's just a white piece of paper and a Sharpie, and I drew these things out and then scanned them, put them into Photoshop, kind of touched them up a little bit, sent the files off to Buzz, and then he carved these stamps. And what they are is, I don't know if you what it looks like now is, I guess you're seeing it. I don't know if it's reverse or not. But these things are all carved in reverse. So it's almost like a mirror image of itself. So that way when you stamp it, it's the correct version. So that's something you got to consider when you're carving it. It's got to be the reverse of the image. Also have, you know, the 5-ring stamp too. Just to give people an idea that, like, you know, I get hit up by people all the time asking me, hey, you know, I want to get a custom stamp made, you know, like, you know, I did this one for Dom. I don't know if Dom's around or not. This is his little DD stamp that I made, Dom DiMatteo. He's the guy that rides my boards down in SoCal. And his brand's also the Thrusty brand, Boog company. He's got a little brand that does some merch and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I do things for people every once in a while, but you know, I have a little triangle stamp too. So this is like the big one, and then so like Buzz did this one, but I did this one on my CNC machine here. I have a little CNC machine in the shop where I can do my own stamps now, so I don't have to be taking anybody else's time to get it done. But you know, as far as time goes now, and people ask me, well, geez, I'd love to get a custom stamp made. How much does it cost? I'll get to your question in a second, Andrew. Like, just to put this in perspective, this stamp right here, I mean, it's about 6 inches or something tall, and you know, it has all these voids that are out here. And the bigger the voids that have to be carved out of this piece of aluminum just takes time. This stamp took me probably about 16 hours of carve time on my CNC machine. It took me 2 days to carve this thing. So I did about half of it because you have to switch bits out. So what I do is I have a bigger bit that hogs most of the stuff out, and then I have a smaller bit that comes back in and does all the detail work. So it took me 2 days to carve this stamp out. So when people ask me how much does it cost, just be ready. It's not because my time's worth something. I'm not going to spend 16 hours of my time and not charge somebody for it. So but small stamps, like Dom's little stamp here, this only took a couple hours. This is only I think it's about 2.5 inches ish, but this only took like 3 or 4 hours to carve this one out. So as long as you keep the stuff small and really simple and blocky, you can't have a lot of crazy detail in it. It needs to be simple and blocky with the bits that I have. So if you want something done and you have a cool idea for artwork, I mean, I'm open to it. But like I said, what it does is it takes me away from building boards, and I don't want to spend time carving stamps when I can be working on boards. So it's kind of, I try to balance out my time. I'd rather be building boards than making stamps. So this is a Hawaiian Islands one. I've been thinking about making a California state stamp too. I've made this Hawaii one, but I've put this on a lot of boards going to Hawaii. But it sure would be cool to have a California stamp for the boards. California might want a California stamp. I know Andrew's on here, and he's asked me to make a North Carolina stamp for him, and we might be getting that done here before the end of the year or something. Andrew asked, what's my favorite? Yeah, Morro Rock stamp. I actually, back when in the tubes days, I talked Buzz into carving me. It was, if the Morro Bay skyline, we have the Morro Rock, plus we have the 3 stacks, what we call 3 stacks in a rock. It's kind of a little thing around here, but they're actually going to tear those stacks down here in the next couple. They've been out there for like 50 years. It was part of an old coal electric plant, but they shut it down now because we have the big nuclear power plant that's in Diablo Canyon. But Buzz carved me a little 3 rocks and 3 stacks in a rock stamp. I had that down at the tube shop, but a more rock stamp could be kind of fun. I might entertain doing something simple for that. That'd be kind of cool stamp to have too for the local guys around here. Andrew asks, what's my favorite tool in the shop? As far as obviously the laminator. There's no secret that machine is. You couldn't build a board without it. So I designed and built the whole thing. So I designed it off the laminator I used at Tubes, but I came up with the design of it, and I just based it off the one I've been doing down at Tubes. And so I think as far as my favorite tool is the laminator for sure. It's there's a lot of pride that went into that, and I'm very happy I spent the time to make that machine. I couldn't build boards without it. And that's the thing, is you got to have that machine to make boards, and there's very few of those machines even in our country. So, and there's a couple different styles. We touched on this before. There's hot air laminator, and then there's an infrared heater laminator. So there's a couple different styles, but I feel that the hot air laminator, like what they call the Buzz Tech lamination system, is because Buzz pretty much came up with that style of laminator and refined the design over the years. That thing is no joke. It is a proper machine, and it's designed to make bodyboards. It's an amazing design and machine. So pretty happy I have all the knowledge about how to build one of those things in my head. That way, being the fact that I built my own laminator, if anything ever goes wrong with it, I can fix it myself because I built the whole thing. So that's, there's always maintenance things that come up and fine tuning that you have to do with these machines. They're fickle. So it takes a little bit of time and energy to really dial them all in. JK's asking, yeah, I know, yeah, stamp. Thanks for the stamps are pretty cool. I try to have a kind of a range of stuff so that way we can do cool designs on the boards. It really does add to the uniqueness of all the boards, just being able to have multiple kind of stamp options. So you can really customize what a board looks like just with stamps. JK's asking, what core would I use for cold water with a lot of flex, like an old school board, and also good memory, or with the board, when the board snaps back, this would be for non or single string board. Like I said, I only build polypropylene boards. I think it's the best core, and depending on the reinforcement, you can get plenty of flex in a polypro board, even in cold water. It's just, it's a balance of the reinforcement that goes into the board. So you just got to, depending on how much flex or what type of flex you want, then we just sit down and figure out the stringer setup or no stringer setup or mesh or no mesh or deck mesh. And, there's options to make a board stiff or flexy. It just depends on what the customer wants. But like I said, polypropylene to me is the best core, just because it has amazing properties. It has memory. Like, I don't know if you guys were around or watched the last one. I broke out a few pieces of core and kind of did some, like, showed you how they flex and how they pop back to shape. Or the like a traditional PE board, like the old school ones, there. That's what a lot of old school boards were made out of, is this that PE core that it's super flexy, but it just doesn't pop back to shape very well. I don't think it doesn't have recoil. And man, you need for a proper performing. I mean, this is all just my opinion. I know guys out there swear by PE core boards, and that's what they like, and that's what they ride, and that's cool. I mean, like, but I'm probably not the shaper for you, because I like I said, I'm a believer in polypropylene boards, and that's kind of all I really want to make these days. I don't want to sacrifice the quality of my boards for some. And then, also, the more a board flexes, the more chances you have to crease those boards too. Like, the more flexy it gets, I mean, the skins can only flex so far hard before they're going to start creasing. So that's a factor on boards that really flex out, is that you might get some creasing in the decks and stuff that you wouldn't get if you had proper reinforcement in the board. So yeah, I mean, that's, I would definitely just say PP. If you want a lot of flex, like thin it out and keep the stringers to a minimum. And depending on how much buoyancy you need, obviously that's sometimes a factor. But just going with a thinner polypro board, it has quite a bit of flex. And like I said, even I ride single string boards here at home, and with slick mesh, and then my boards flex just fine. I mean, I ride about a 2 1/16, 2 1/8 inch thick board most of the time. So the little boards flex just fine. I mean, you look at almost all my boards, they have some minor elbow creasing in them because they flex. That's what happens. Yeah, thinner is better, in my opinion. Thicker is, we touched about this in the last one, but too much buoyancy is kind of a bad thing, because it gets you riding way up on the surface of of the water, and then you tend to side slip out a little bit more. Having a little bit less volume once you're riding is actually a better thing, because it sinks your rails in. You got more control, and it engages the rail and your channels better. It's just a better deal to have a little bit thinner board than thicker, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, anybody got any other questions? Fire them off in there. I'm definitely wanting some help with the chat here, but it's all good. Another thing I maybe wanted to touch on tonight that I hinted at is that, what you have in our industry now is you have very few people that do actually have a laminator. First off, you cannot make a boogie board without a laminator. Don't even try. People ask me all the time, "Will you sell me a piece of core?" I'm like, "Well, do you have a laminator to laminate the skins on?" "Oh, I didn't think about that." Well, dude, you can't build a board at home with a heat gun and a razor knife. You need a laminator. You need bandsaws, and you need curve templates, and there's things that you need to make a proper board. Sure, you can try to do contact adhesive and glue your skins on. I know there were some brands back in the day that didn't have a laminator, and they just use contact adhesive to glue skins on. But you're not going to have the same properties in a board that you get with a proper laminated board. So getting back to that is that you need a laminator to build boards. And what it is, there's those machines, and the knowledge how to build those machines are very scarce. There's not too many people out there that even have a laminator. I know of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There might be 5 laminators in all of the United States that I know of. I'm not saying there are not more, but there's not anybody actively making boards or anybody actively using a laminator in the country. There's very few people that actually make boards. So, but think about how many brands of buggy boards out there are. It boggles my mind sometimes how many brands there are, but how few manufacturers there are. There's very few people that are making boards, but there's just tons of people out there that, I get hit up almost every month by somebody said, "Hey, I got a pocket full of money and I want to start a bodyboard brand. Will you make my boards for me?" Nope. You go out, figure out how to build that machine over there. You go out and build a swinging bandsaw so you can cut your nose. You go out and, figure out the templates and how you're going to drill stringers and all that stuff. Like I said, it's a rite of passage to having your own brand to me. And I I don't want to step on any toes out there because I know there's a lot of factories and things that survive off of making other brands boards. But it's really, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems with our industry is that there's so many brands, but so few manufacturers of boards. And what that does is it leads to a lack of diversity in designs. And you think about how I make boards versus how like Jimmy or Pete make boards, or Gato or anything like that. You need a variety of shapers taking different approaches and using different machines and different techniques to create diversity in boards. Otherwise, if you have one big factory that makes boards for 10 or 15 brands, do you think, X brand is going to be better than Y brand because, this pro rides this board and this pro, I like this board. This board's better because it has this guy's name on it. But those two boards are made in the exact same factory with the exact same hands, on the exact same machines, the exact same material. All they do is have different stamps on them. And it boggles my mind sometimes when people don't realize where their board comes from and who's actually making it. And they think that, this brand's better than that brand. But neither one of those brands make their boards. They're all bought from the same factory overseas. And it really, I think that's one of our biggest problems in our industry is there's too many brands and not enough manufacturers. And it leads to a lack of diversity in ideas and progression in our sport because those boards are all made the same way. If you're, those brands, it just kills me that, if you got a pocket full of money that you want to try to capitalize on somebody else's hard work, that's what it is for me is that, every board that I would have, if I wanted to, make boards for ABC brand, oh yeah, sure. I'll build you board. Oh, well, what they want to do is they want to buy low and sell high. So they want to make all the profit on the board, which I can't do that. I'm in business to survive my brand and to build my brand, not to build your brand. And I just wish sometimes that some of the other manufacturers out there would maybe say no sometimes to people with a pocket full of money. And I realize you got to do it sometimes, depending on your scenario. You got to keep the doors open and you got to keep people employed. I'm lucky. I'm a one guy show and I can say no to all these other brands because I don't have to do that. I just want to build boards for me and for my customers. And you can figure out how to do it. You want to have your brand, you build a laminator. You want to, it just kills me sometimes. I just want to vent a little bit about that. And like I said, I don't want to step on anybody's toes out there, anybody out there that keeps their doors open by doing that kind of stuff. But, it kills me to know that people don't understand where their boards come from and who's actually making them. And a lot of the brands don't tell you where their boards are made. They want you to think that they got their own factory and they're building all their own boards. But really, there's very few people that actually build boards these days. So, yeah. Okay, I'm done venting about that unless anybody has any questions about it. But, oh, yeah, Phil, back in the day, yeah, there were some kit boards. And, yeah, I think that those kit boards, were all like contact adhesive type situations that where you're gluing skins. It came with some glue. If I remember seeing those old ads where you'd have to glue your own skins on, and then you can kind of you can build almost your own board. I don't think I could do that. Because like I said, the way that my boards go together, you got to have a proper laminator to be able to laminate slicks and skins onto a board. So it'd be interesting, but like I said, I'm a true believer in the Buzz Tech lamination system. It's amazing. What it does, I don't think what a lot of people realize is that it adds pre-tension into the skin. So what I mean by pre-tension is like if you were just going to glue a skin on, like it's kind of inert. So like you're going to put contact adhesive on one side on the core, and then you're going to put contact adhesive on the back side of the skin, and you're going to stick it down, right? There's nothing that you're adding into that, right? So, you're just sticking the skin to the core. But through the hot air laminating system, the BuzzTech system, what it does is you're blasting air in between the two things, and you have this big heavy-duty roller that presses down on those skins as it's all getting pushed together, right? But what that does is it's really, really hot air. So what it does is it heats the materials up. And what happens is that stretches the especially on the Surlyn side, you'd be amazed when you laminate a bottom slick on a board how much reverse, because what happens is when you put it on, it stretches because you're like pushing and stretching it on as it's getting fed through the laminator. And what that does is it cools, it shrinks, and what happens is you get all this crazy reverse rocker in the bottom half of the board, just on because that's the first lamination step, is putting the bottom slick on. So what that does is if you have all this crazy reverse rocker in a board, now, okay, geez, I got the bottom slick on. Now I got to put the top skin on. So what the process is for that is you ultimately want a flat board. But what happens now is you have all this stress that's the slick is pulling the board in reverse like this, right? So when you go to put the skin, the deck skin on, what you want to do is try to get that. You want to shim it all up, and you know my laminator has a downdraft table, so it actually vacuum sucks it down flat, and then I shim up the nose. And I use different shims depending on if you want nose rocker or you want a flat deck board. So I have a bunch of different shims how I shim up the nose. So you shim it flat, and then you laminate the deck skin across. And what that does is you're also stretching the deck skin across. And what that does is it adds its own tension and pulls it back the other way. So ultimately, and then after it all cools off, hopefully you'll got a flat board if that's the goal. But what that does now is that you have all these tensions that are built into the two opposing skins. So when you go and flex your board like you normally would, because the slick is trying to pull it in reverse all the time, and the deck skin's basically holding it flat. But if you even stretch it, if you're flexing it on your elbows and you're pulling up on the nose, once you like let go in reverse, it has even more snap and pop and return into the board. So it adds like life and snap and pop into the board because of how those reverse tensions happen with the lamination process. So I don't think a lot of people understand that's something that happens within the lamination process, is that you put all these pre-tensions into the skins, and that adds life to the board instead of just being glued on, and there's no stretching of the materials through the lamination process. So hopefully that I know there's a lot of people that probably didn't know about that stuff, but that's something that hopefully opens some people's minds about the lamination process. Getting close to that 1 hour mark, so I don't want to cut it off too early, but if anybody's got any questions, now's the time. Andrew's asking about the rolling like like I said, once you laminate this, he's asking about the top chine, and the top chine is the little top piece of the rail. You get your bottom rail angle, and then you got your little top chine, which is like the angle on the top part of the board. So a lot of most boards you take the deck skin and you round over that deck skin on the chine. Certain boards, people want that piece kind of cut off and then a separate color, and you get what they call a cut top chine. So you get like, you maybe get a different color on the top. I think it's a cool look, and I don't mind doing it. The only problem is it's kind of a material waster, because what you're doing is you have enough deck skin to roll over those spots, but now I got to take and cut all that off and then get more skin and then put it onto the chine. So I don't mind doing it, but like I said, it's a little bit of a material waster for me, and the materials are very valuable around these parts. So I actually, on my boards, I prefer having a rolled chine. I don't a rolled over chine. I don't like a cut top chine on my personal boards. I'd rather just have a rolled over chine. I think it feels better in my hand. It's more smooth around the top edge too. And the more seams, that's another thing, is you're cutting that off and you're putting a separate piece on. It adds more seams into the board. So more seams, more chance for water to get into the board. So that's just, I think when you roll the chine over, you actually get more of a watertight situation because you have less seams on the board. Phil, the lamination, I know there's plywood laminators. That's how they build plywood, is there's specific plywood laminators out there. I've seen them online. There's a couple companies here in the United States that make plywood laminators. And, when I was, looking at setting my laminator up, I definitely was looking at those going, man, I wonder if that thing could work to build a boogie board. But it's better to do something specialized specifically for a bodyboard, because those things are made to put really thin pieces of plywood together, and then there's glue systems that go in between all of those laminations of plywood, and they feed a bunch of stuff together to build plywood that way. It's kind of a little bit the same process about it. Lamination is the same theory, as you're taking these two things and you're kind of sticking them together. So that's the theory behind it all. Andrew's asking about cork into my Boogie. Would I ever integrate cork into the Boogie? So I know there's a guy in, I think he's in New Zealand. If you guys, nobody knows about him, he does the cork boards. I think there's some stuff on Instagram and Facebook and stuff. I follow him. I'm pretty amazed by the work he does. It's pretty cool. I know he's been experimenting with the vector systems and put plugs in the boards too. But man, it seems pretty interesting, And like I said, cork's an amazing, biodegradable material. There's no plastics in it. It's definitely something I'm curious about, but I wonder how watertight it is. And what's the core inside the underneath the cork skins? Is it polypro or is it polyethylene? And then you're probably not heat laminating that. You might, because there's films and glues that you can stick together through the lamination process that you could stick. Maybe you could stick some cork sheets to a board through the normal laminator versus doing contact adhesive and that kind of situation. But yeah, I'd like to play around with it one day. Another thing is, I'm an avid woodworker. Someday I would love to experiment with building some, little Pismo boards, man, that are all built out of wood. I definitely, have all the clamps and scrap wood. You can see back here. I got just wood all throughout the shop. It's crazy. It's just leftover from projects. I could probably make some pretty cool stuff. I think that might be something I experiment with in the future too, is building some wood Pismo boards. That would be kind of fun. Just materials are materials. I like to stick with the stuff that I know, but I don't mind experiment with some other stuff if I think I can make it all come together. Well, we're past the 1 hour mark, so unless anybody's got any dying questions they need to answer this week, I'm gonna probably sign off here soon because I'm hungry and I want to get some dinner. I appreciate everybody for coming out and all the support and stuff, and let's keep this thing going, and hopefully we can get more and more people showing up. I know the view count on the previous ones are going up. Every week it seems like I get more and more views on the ones that I've done. So I really want to keep doing this and build some cool content for people to watch and educate themselves about boogie boards. It's there's not too many people out there willing to share all this knowledge, and I believe if you don't share and pass on knowledge, that it's lost. How many people know how to build the laminator, and somebody's got that knowledge, has to be passed down the line to somebody so it's not lost. And I'm very fortunate that Buzz was lucky enough to pass the knowledge on to me. So, and I in turn want to, over time, help somebody out. I help Andrew out a little bit here and there with some questions and ideas and materials and stuff. And, I try to mentor people and help people out when I can with some stuff now and again. I'm always here for people if they have questions about stuff. So I try to make myself as available as any shaper in the world. So, good luck talking to anybody that's a professional shaper. They're almost inaccessible. It's crazy. So I don't want to be like them. I want to be me, and I want to share and spread all this knowledge to people. So that's what these chats are kind of all about. Anyway, appreciate everybody here and that showed up and all the questions. And maybe I think I'm going to sign off now. I appreciate everybody, and thanks for the support. And I'm going to sign off. So thanks a lot, guys. And I'll see you next week. I should be around. So ciao for now.